He told his boy on the phone, "Make sure she dead," and those words carried a chill that still hangs heavy today. It was not a stranger he was talking about. It was not some random enemy either. It was his own mother who had given him everything he wanted. A successful businesswoman who raised her only son with love and sacrifice, now betrayed in a way nobody saw coming. The people around her never imagined the hand she fed would become the hand that cut her down. But to understand how we got here, we need to rewind. Yolanda Holmes came up in Chicago working hard to carve out a name that mattered. She was not some quiet figure hiding behind others. She was known in Uptown as a woman who built her life with her own two hands. She opened up Nappyhead's hair salon on North Broadway, and that spot became more than just a business. People came for the cuts, the styles, the conversation, and the presence of a woman who looked out for her neighborhood. She was 45 years old in 2012, still pushing every day to keep her salon running strong while keeping her family together. Yolanda was the mother of one son, Kwame Wilson, who would later call himself Young QC on the mic. Everybody around her said she loved that boy to the point of spoiling him. She gave him everything she could, and nobody could deny the life he was enjoying because of her work. People who knew her remembered Yolanda buying him fresh clothes whenever he wanted. She spent money on jewelry for him, gave him access to cash whenever he asked, and even went all out to buy him a customized Ford Mustang when he came of age. The judge in his later trial would even say, whatever he wanted, his mother gave to him. A car, a job. One could say he was spoiled. Those words were not exaggeration. They were facts pulled straight from his life. Kwame himself understood how much his mother loved him, and he even carried her name tattooed on his shoulder. That ink was supposed to show loyalty and gratitude, but looking back, it became more like a false symbol when compared with his choices. Yolanda wanted her son to avoid the path of his father, Jeffrey Wilson, who was already locked up with a life sentence for murder. Jeffrey had gang ties and violence trailing behind him, and Yolanda never wanted her son to repeat those mistakes. So Yolanda worked harder than most to keep her son safe. She surrounded him with opportunity, made sure he was eating good, kept him driving fresh, and made sure he never touched broke life like many others in Uptown. She was the type of mother who shielded him from the cold reality outside while still giving him a chance to build something positive. Her friends said she was not just a good mother, but a great one. She gave her time, her money, her energy, and her focus, all for her only child. She was not running the streets, she was running her business and pouring all the results back into her family. People in her salon said Yolanda treated everybody with respect and always kept a smile, which is why the neighborhood loved her. To outsiders, Yolanda and her son had a bond that looked unbreakable. She was the provider, and he was the son who never lacked. Yolanda gave him the resources to step into music, fashion, and a flashy lifestyle before he even earned it. He had the car, the chains, the designer fits, and the image of somebody who was already successful. But that success was not built by him. It was financed by Yolanda. The reality was that she had created what looked like the perfect setup. Most kids growing up in Chicago during the early 2000s would have done anything for that kind of backing. But for Kwame, the taste of what he had was never enough. He wanted more, not just from his mother, but from the world. That hunger for attention, money, and status started to outgrow the foundation Yolanda had built for him. It is that contrast that hits hardest when you look at her story. Yolanda gave him life, stability, and opportunity, while his response was to chase after more than she could ever provide. The spoiled child, who had every advantage, still felt like he needed to play bigger, and that mindset would turn a mother's love into the reason for her downfall. By 2012, Kwame Wilson was 23 years old and moving around Chicago with his stage name, Young QC. He wanted the world to know him as a rapper and actor, not just Yolanda's child. He kept posting flashy pictures online that showed followers an image of wealth and swagger. He wanted thousands of people on Facebook and Instagram to see him as bigger than life. He was showing off with his customized Ford Mustang that Yolanda bought, the same one he later added gull-wing doors. He was rocking jewelry, fresh sneakers, and expensive clothes that his mother's money helped pay for. To people scrolling on social media, he looked like another young dude chasing stardom in Uptown. He wanted attention everywhere he went because clout in those years was the same as currency. Young QC had followers who hyped him up, but he did not have a music catalog that mattered. He dropped songs online, he filmed videos, and he kept talking about his plans, but nothing really popped. The fans were mainly neighborhood kids, and some were just curious about his constant flexing. He had enough money behind him to look real, but not enough talent or grind to stand out. Yolanda was still the foundation of everything he had, because her money and support made the image possible. She gave him the apartment on North Broadway and allowed him to live with comfort most people dreamed about. She was paying the bills while he was busy posing as the man on social media. Her love and sacrifices created his whole stage for flexing. The boy loved being photographed holding stacks of $100 bills like he was already a superstar. He made YouTube videos where he stood next to his Mustang and talked like he had already made it. People in Uptown said he looked like he believed his own hype, walking with an attitude that screamed self-importance. But anybody close enough knew he did not really grind his way there. He was not performing in major venues, not booking big shows, and not selling real records. The hype lived online, fueled by pictures of Burberry shopping trips, gold chains, and fancy sneakers. He was trying to convince people he belonged in the same conversation as Chicago rappers who were actually buzzing. Artists like Chief Keef, Lil Durk, and King Louie were dropping heat and building real movements. Young QC wanted that spotlight but did not have that foundation. He had the car, he had the chain, but he didn't have respect out here. In Chicago, especially Uptown, you can't buy credibility with your mom's money. You need a grind, a story, or something that shows people you earned what you got. Kwame never developed that because Yolanda gave him too much cushion against struggle. He leaned on her instead of building his own foundation. The desire for fame kept growing because he could see others around him turning attention into actual careers. He wanted to be more than Yolanda's son, more than the salon baby everybody remembered growing up in nappy heads. He wanted to stand as the star of his own show, the man everyone looked at with envy. That hunger was not about music alone, it was about ego. Behind the flash, there was a constant emptiness that followers on social media never saw. He was not moving through Chicago music circles with respect. He was just showing off what Yolanda provided. The attention kept him high for a moment, but it faded quickly because people eventually saw through the surface. He knew it, and it frustrated him every time the numbers did not rise. By the end of 2012, young QC was living two realities at once. Online, he looked like an upcoming star ready to break through. In real life, he was a young man still completely funded by his mother's love and sacrifice. That imbalance between his dreams and his reality kept building pressure inside him. He was no longer satisfied being seen as Yolanda's child because he wanted the world to see him as a star on his own. In the early morning hours of September 2nd, 2012, the uptown neighborhood of Chicago was quiet with most people still asleep. Inside an apartment on North Broadway, Yolanda Holmes was resting in bed next to her on and off boyfriend, Curtis Wyatt. The clock was creeping past 4:30 a.m. when the buzzer rang from downstairs. Yolanda thought nothing of it because she believed her son was returning home late from the night. Like always, she trusted him and opened the door. The man who entered that building was not Kwame Wilson, but a 22-year-old named Eugene Spencer. He had been sent by Kwame and carried a disguise that made him look like he was just another tenant returning from laundry. He walked in holding a hanger of clothes and a bottle of detergent, hoping to avoid suspicion if anyone saw him on camera. Spencer had the code to get inside because Kwame provided it, making his entry smooth and easy. Spencer moved through the halls until he reached Yolanda's apartment, knowing she expected her son. When he entered the bedroom, Yolanda was still half asleep, while Curtis Wyatt was lying beside her. Spencer pulled a gun and started shooting, striking Yolanda in the head as the quiet morning turned violent. Wyatt woke up instantly and launched himself toward the attacker. The two men fought fiercely in that bedroom, crashing and swinging in a struggle for survival. Wyatt managed to knock the magazine out of the gun, causing the weapon to break apart on the floor. The attacker responded by pistol whipping Wyatt in the head with the remaining piece. Wyatt took heavy blows and eventually collapsed unconscious, his head bleeding from the impact. The chaos in that small bedroom had already left blood on the sheets and walls. Spencer ran out of the apartment, shaken by the fight that did not go according to plan. He stepped outside, panicked and unsure if Yolanda was truly dead after the gunshots. With adrenaline racing, he pulled out his phone and called Kwame Wilson. Spencer admitted that Yolanda had been shot, but added that she might still be alive. Those words should have been enough for a son to stop everything, but Kwame gave an order that stunned investigators later. On that call, he told Spencer, "Make sure she dead." That single command showed how far gone Kwame was, choosing greed and ego over the woman who gave him everything. Spencer, following the direction of the man who hired him, turned back and entered the apartment again. This time he did not carry the broken gun, but instead grabbed a knife from Yolanda's own kitchen. He walked into the same bedroom where Yolanda was still alive and fighting to breathe after the gunshot. Spencer then stabbed Yolanda multiple times in her bed, making sure she would not survive. Detectives later described it as an act of overkill, the kind of brutal finishing that left no chance of recovery. Yolanda Holmes, the woman known for her generosity and hustle in Uptown, was left lifeless on her blood-soaked sheets. Curtis Wyatt remained on the floor unconscious, his body battered but still holding on. By the time Spencer left for the second time, the crime scene was a nightmare of chaos. Blood stained the walls and sheets, a broken handgun lay scattered on the floor, and a trail of violence showed the struggle that had happened. There was also confusion because some cash was still left in the apartment, untouched by the killer. Normally, in a robbery, the money is the first thing taken, but here it sat as if the motive was never theft. When police and paramedics arrived around dawn, they found Yolanda already gone. She had been shot in the forehead and stabbed repeatedly. Her life ended in the place where she should have felt safest. Curtis Wyatt was discovered barely conscious, his head bleeding and his body battered from the pistol whipping. He was rushed to the hospital while detectives began to piece together what looked like a violent but puzzling crime. The early morning streets outside were calm, but inside that apartment was a scene nobody could fully explain. A respected salon owner and mother was dead. The survivor looked suspicious to investigators, and there were strange clues like headphones broken on the floor and cash left scattered. Nothing about the apartment screamed random robbery, but nobody knew yet that the real architect of the killing was her only son. For neighbors who later saw the flashing lights, the story started as another tragic Chicago crime. But for detectives stepping over blood and broken pieces, they knew they were looking at something deeper. The apartment on North Broadway was not just another murder scene. It was the opening to one of the most cold-blooded betrayals the city had ever seen. When the sun came up over Uptown, word of the killing started to spread fast. By the time officers taped off the block, a crowd of shocked neighbors was already gathering outside the apartment building. Around 6 in the morning, a familiar figure walked up to the yellow tape with panic on his face. It was Kwame Wilson, Yolanda's only son, arriving to see what had happened. Witnesses said he dropped right on the sidewalk, crying like his whole world had just collapsed in front of him. He was wailing, screaming, shaking, putting on the picture of a son destroyed by sudden loss. Neighbors watching believed he was truly broken because they had no reason to see him any other way. They only knew him as Yolanda's child, the one she loved and protected. The police told him what happened, and Kwame cried even louder, falling into the arms of people around him. To those looking, it seemed like the young man was living through the worst moment of his life. Later that same day, his grieving image was talked about by neighbors and replayed in conversations around the block. Everybody felt sympathy because losing a mother in that way was almost too much to process. Not long after, Kwame even gave comments to local media, speaking about his mother like he was the victim of random violence. He told a reporter that a man came into their home and killed her just to steal. The story painted him as another wounded soul caught in a cruel robbery gone wrong. People in the city nodded along, feeling his pain, thinking it was another Chicago tragedy. At that point, nobody suspected him of anything, because the act looked too real. Yolanda had just been murdered, and her son was on television crying about it. He looked like a young man who lost the only person who cared for him. The streets gave him sympathy, and police treated him as family of the victim. But as one neighbor said later, he pulled up acting like his world crashed, but really, he already knew the ending. Detectives started the process by looking at the most obvious possibility, which was Curtis Wyatt, the boyfriend who survived the attack. Wyatt had been found unconscious and bleeding from his head after fighting the intruder. But police noticed something strange when they looked closer at his actions. He admitted that after the attack, he tried to clean up parts of the bloody scene before officers arrived. That detail made detectives wonder if he was hiding something important. Another issue was the question of survival. Investigators kept asking themselves why Wyatt was left alive while Yolanda was the one killed so brutally. If the intruder wanted to kill everybody, why did Curtis survive? This question led detectives to keep him under suspicion, even as he maintained that he fought the gunman and then blacked out. Wyatt agreed to take a polygraph test, but his results came back as inconclusive and possibly deceptive. That added more doubt to his story, and police started treating him as a main suspect. He insisted he saw the attacker's face during the fight, and his injuries were consistent with the struggle. But detectives were not satisfied. They wanted more evidence before clearing him completely. Crime scene technicians tried to pull DNA from the broken headphones left on the floor during the fight. They ran tests, but no matches came back from any database. They also swabbed the shattered handgun that broke apart during the struggle, but no usable prints were found. The evidence seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving investigators frustrated. Surveillance footage from the building gave detectives another lead. Cameras showed a hooded man entering the building at 4:32 a.m., carrying a hanger of clothes and a bottle of detergent. 14 minutes later, the same man walked out wearing a different hoodie, trying to look like a resident. That clip confirmed an intruder entered that night, but police had no clear identity for him. Months went by with no arrests, and the case started to grow cold. Yolanda's family grew frustrated, showing up to status hearings with no progress. In one dramatic moment during 2013, Yolanda's uncle stood up in court, pointed at Kwame and yelled, "You're going to hell, Kwame," before deputies removed him. That outburst hinted that some family members already carried suspicion toward the son. In the neighborhood, rumors were spreading too. Some whispered that Curtis Wyatt knew more than he admitted, while others quietly said the son's spending looked suspicious. But at that point, police had no proof against anyone. The case sat open, waiting for the next break. By late 2013, detectives were still struggling with the unanswered questions surrounding Yolanda Holmes' killing. The case had been cold for over a year, but a careful review of her phone records finally gave investigators the break they needed. They discovered Yolanda owned 2 cell phones, but one line carried unusual activity during the exact hours of the murder. That second line was not just some random account, it was actually being used by her son, Kwame Wilson. When detectives pulled those records, the truth started unfolding in front of them. The second line showed multiple calls back and forth with a 22-year-old named Eugene Spencer during the murder window. This was the same Spencer later caught on surveillance footage entering Yolanda's apartment building around 4:30 a.m. carrying clothes on a hanger and a bottle of detergent. Suddenly, the image of a grieving son collapsed and Kwame himself became the prime suspect. Chicago police picked up Kwame right before Christmas in December 2013. When questioned, he tried to play calm and cooperative, but his story was thin. He admitted knowing Spencer, but claimed the whole plan was only supposed to be a robbery. He told detectives Spencer went too far, painting himself as someone who never wanted Yolanda dead. The officers did not buy it because the records told a different story. They brought Spencer in for questioning, along with Loriana Johnson, Kwame's girlfriend who drove the getaway car. Under pressure, Spencer's story fell apart piece by piece. He finally confessed to the setup, explaining how Kwame gave him the building code, provided the gun, and even planned the laundry disguise. The most chilling part came when Spencer admitted calling Kwame after the shooting, saying Yolanda might still be alive. According to Spencer, Kwame ordered him to go back and finish her with the words, "Make sure she dead." That was the final detail that stripped away the act and revealed the truth. Once police secured Spencer's confession, prosecutors focused on why a son would plan his mother's death. The answer was simple and ugly: money. Yolanda Holmes had 2 life insurance policies and savings accounts worth around $90,000. Kwame Wilson was the sole beneficiary, meaning everything flowed straight to him after her death. Within a week of Yolanda's murder, he walked into a bank and drained her accounts. Records showed he pulled out around $70,000 in cash almost immediately. Instead of grief, he went on a spending spree that shocked even seasoned detectives. He bought sneakers in bulk, flashy jewelry, and even spent $1,500 on a litter of purebred dogs. He poured money into his Ford Mustang, paying for custom gold wing doors to make the car stand out even more. On social media, he flaunted every purchase as if he had earned it, Pictures showed him with stacks of $100 bills spread across the floor. He posed in Burberry stores holding cash, grinned in massage parlors with money fanned in his hands, and wore Yolanda's gold jewelry in selfies. He even posted videos showing off guns, drugs, and gold chains, trying to brand himself as a rapper who had finally made it. The boldest stunt came in May 2013 when he recorded a video titled "Nick Giving Back." He rolled up to a Chase bank, withdrew $20,000, and stood on the hood of his Mustang while tossing handfuls of bills to a cheering crowd. Fans screamed as cash rained down, and Kwame shouted that he did it for the people. But investigators later described it differently, saying he was literally throwing his murdered mother's money into the streets. Reactions were split. Some fans online called him generous and real, while others whispered it looked suspicious for a son who just lost his mother. That video became evidence later in court, showing not just arrogance, but also proof of what he did with Yolanda's savings. His own need for clout left digital footprints that police used to build the case against him. The arrest came fast after the confessions, and by December 2013, Kwame Wilson, Eugene Spencer, and Loriana Johnson were all facing charges. Prosecutors hit them with first-degree murder, attempted murder, and home invasion, stacking everything that matched the bloody evidence. Yolanda's family packed the hearings year after year, watching the case drag on with constant delays. Every court date was another wound reopened, another reminder of the betrayal. Inside those courtrooms, emotions ran raw. Yolanda's Uncle Jerry once stared across the room at Kwame in shackles and shouted words that echoed the pain, saying, "What's up, Kwame?" before deputies pulled him out. His Aunt Sandra later told reporters the ordeal tore holes in the family that could never be mended. They had raised that boy in their circle, trusted him, and now they were forced to sit behind prosecutors fighting for justice against him. When the trial finally opened in 2019, the Cook County courtroom became the stage where every hidden piece was laid out. Prosecutors played phone records showing Kwame and Spencer locked in communication the night of the killing. They presented the surveillance video of Spencer walking into Yolanda's building disguised as a man returning from laundry. They rolled Spencer's taped confession where he admitted Kwame ordered him to finish Yolanda with a knife. The jury also watched the infamous video of Kwame standing on the hood of his Mustang, making it rain $20,000 on a crowd. That clip stunned jurors because they now knew the money came directly from Yolanda's savings. The defense tried spinning a weak angle, claiming Kwame only planned a robbery and never wanted his mother dead. But prosecutors shut that down by pointing out his exact words to Spencer over the phone. Curtis Wyatt testified too, describing the night he fought the intruder, got pistol whipped, and woke to find Yolanda dead. His injuries matched the fight, and his voice in court carried the pain of that night. For the jury, the pieces fit too clearly to ignore. By March 2019, both juries returned guilty verdicts. Kwame Wilson was convicted of murder, attempted murder, and home invasion, while Eugene Spencer was also found guilty of every charge against him. In January 2020, Judge Stanley Sachs looked straight at the two men and called their crime by a word rarely used: matricide. He reminded the courtroom that Yolanda gave Kwame everything, from love to money, and he repaid her by planning her death. Then, he delivered punishment meant to last lifetimes. Kwame Wilson was sentenced to 99 years, while Eugene Spencer received 100 years. Loriana Johnson, who drove the getaway car, had already pleaded guilty in 2015 and received 14 years, but she was paroled by 2020. When given the chance to speak, Kwame's statement rang hollow, saying quietly, "Nobody loved my mother more than me." Yolanda's family shook their heads in disbelief. After 7 years of waiting, they finally heard justice, though the wound never healed. Her Aunt Sandra said through tears, "We still don't understand why." The story of young QC is one of greed swallowing love and entitlement destroying family bonds. Yolanda Holmes gave her son everything he could need, but he wanted more than comfort. He wanted status and money that wasn't his. The community was shocked, left whispering wild theories about blood sacrifices and Illuminati rituals, though the truth was simple betrayal. Yolanda's legacy as a mother and businesswoman stood tall, while Kwame's name became infamous in prison records. As Judge Sachs said on sentencing day, she gave him life, and he chose to take it.